Slater Crusaders. America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here on our latest special. I've always been hesitant to use this word. It seemed overly dramatic, or I think I had a vision for what this word meant, literally a vision for it. And whatever was happening didn't precisely fit that vision, so I just dismissed the use of that word. But I've come to see that there is no question. The people who have been using this word all along were right. What's happening at our southern border is an invasion. I went back to the original Webster's Dictionary, 1828. I only go to the original dictionary to find out definitions of words. And there's two definitions. First, a hostile entrance into the possessions of another, particularly the entrance of a hostile army into a country for the purpose of conquest or plunder, or the attack of a military force. See, I thought that an invasion was only the military, like the military of another country coming and invading into our country. But then I thought, well, what's the difference between a military and hordes of military-aged men? Oh, but there needs to be like a commander of the military. Well, what if the person orchestrating this is in your own country? Does that count still? I think it does. The second definition, an attack on the rights of another, infringement or violation. I hear a lot of people on the left calling this a humanitarian disaster, what's happening at the border. But they say that from the perspective of the illegal immigrant. It's from their perspective. It's from the Venezuelans' perspective that this is a humanitarian crisis. If there is a humanitarian crisis, what about from the perspective of the American citizen? Which is, of course, who our loyalty must be to first, right? Right now there are, like 11,000 illegal immigrants coming across every day. 11,000 a day. And they're sent all around the country and they stay here. And the Democrats are coming out and they're saying, oh, this is a problem here. We got a problem. You know what the solution is? Give them work permits. Here's AOC saying this. By the way, she's getting yelled at. People screaming, close the border in the conservative bastion of Manhattan. Right, so you can't hear what she's saying in that clip. What she's saying there is we need to get work permits for all these people. We got to get them off of welfare and get them working. Why? Because they say these migrants, which by the way, they're not migrants. Birds migrate. People don't migrate. The idea of a migrant is someone's coming from Mexico into America to pick strawberries, and then they're going to go back to Mexico. That is a migrant. These people are not migrating. They're coming here and they're staying here. But the argument is that they need to get on work permits because they're on welfare and they're taxing our social services. We're going to talk about that later in the show. So we need them to work so that they can pay their own way. That's what Bill Clinton said just the other day too. It's like, no. We don't need them to work. We need them to go back home. One of the talking points from the right for a long time has been, we're against illegal immigration because these people are taking our jobs. And by the way, this isn't just a right-wing talking point. Famed labor hero union leader Cesar Chavez. In California, he's a hero. They have a day off. California's a day off because of Cesar Chavez. There's statues on college campuses to Cesar Chavez. They love Cesar Chavez, but he hated the wetbacks, as he called them. He was a union boss. He hated illegal immigrants because he knew that indeed they take our jobs. Right, so conservatives would say, hey, we don't want illegal immigration because they're taking our jobs. And people on the left would laugh at conservatives. And I know because I used to be that person. But now we're at the point where the Democrats are saying, hey, listen, American citizens, don't worry. We're going to solve this problem by making it easier for them to take your jobs. No, we're going to give them work permits so that they can legally take your jobs. Or at least lower your wages. And then maybe one day, they'll be paying for your welfare. Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, just announced that there are 18,000 job openings from 400 employers. People willing to hire asylum seekers. We'll talk about asylum seekers, what that propaganda term means coming up as well. You know that ABC News poll that came out recently that had Trump up by 10 points over Joe Biden? Remember that poll? The same poll had Biden's approval rating at 30% on the economy, approval rating on the economy at 30%, but his approval rating with the US-Mexican border was at 23%. I think the top two issues that people vote on are the economy and the border. Don't listen to any survey. A lot of surveys come out and they ask people what the most important topics are. Don't listen to that. Right? What people say they care about can be very different than what they actually care about and what they're actually voting on. Right? People will give answers as to what will make them look the best as to what they really care about. But in the end, that's not what they actually care about. What they really care about is the economy, my money, and the border. There's a visceral, instinctual reaction to really both those things, caring about money, and I see my country being invaded, right? I just see it. I see it, and that's bad. When people see their country being invaded, they're not going to vote for that. Not like we've seen it lately. And illegal immigrants are coming in like never before. It's not an exaggeration. It's like never before. The other idea from the left is photo IDs. That's another one which we need to be against, because that's just an institutionalization of these people that shouldn't be allowed here at all. NBC News wrote an article the other day about Donald Trump saying that if he's reelected, he would immediately invoke the Alien Enemies Act. It's part of the Alien and Seditions Act from 1798. But Trump said that he's going to target suspected gang members, drug dealers, and cartel members. That's his focus. Gang members, drug dealers, and cartel members. I'm like, okay, good, but that's not enough. Like, why are we stopping at drug dealers and cartel members? Like, obviously we need to get rid of those people. But what about everyone else? What about everyone who came across illegally in the last 3 years? Let's focus on that. What about the 10,000 people who came across yesterday? What about them? By the way, you may not hear about the border in the news every day. It pops up every couple of weeks. It'll be in for like a day or two, and then it goes away again. It doesn't stop. It's not like the border. It's not like we close up the border and then the illegal immigrants find a hole and they dig through the hole and then it's in the news and then we plug up the hole and then the news goes away. Oh, solve that. No, it's always open. It is always open. We just get distracted. We talk about other things. It's always a problem. If there were 10,000 people who came across 3 weeks ago when it was big in the news, there's still 10,000 every day coming across. But what about those people? We're not going to deport those people too? Maybe future again, President Trump? Well, you know what the truth is? Under current law, they can't. They can't be deported because they're seeking asylum. Now, of course, we got to change the law, and I'm sure there's some executive order things that can be done. This is why Trump, by the way, had remain in Mexico. So there's 5 reasons why someone can be granted asylum. If in your home country you are discriminated because of your race, your religion, your nationality, your political party, or they call it a particular social group. So this would be like freedom fighters. So if you're a freedom fighter in Iran and they consider you a terrorist, right? You can't go back there or else they'll kill you. That's it. Those are the 5 reasons, right? That's it. Those are the only 5 reasons. Because you come from a poor country, that's not enough. Because there's you have a terrible government back in Venezuela and you want to leave because there's not enough jobs there. Economic asylum is not a thing. So none of these people, once they get their asylum hearing, will ever be granted asylum. Not one of them. But the asylum hearings aren't until 2027. And who knows if they'll even ever go to that. And they may not even need to go to that because they'll probably be granted, if the Democrats keep winning, they'll be granted citizenship or work permits or work visas or green cards before that day even comes. But these people say asylum because if you get your foot in America and grant asylum, we can't deport you until your hearing. That's what the law currently says. We can't deport you until your hearing happens. That's why Trump said, no, remain in Mexico. You want to apply for asylum? That's great. Do it in Mexico. And then when we have your hearing, we'll let you in if we grant it, but not in the meantime. So this is basic stuff. The basic stuff, very, very simple to fix. But because we're not following the law, right? It's crystal clear in the law. But because we're not following it, we're just encouraging more lawlessness. And you're being lied to, of course, in the process. This is a New York Post headline. Migrant children pictured howling in pain howling in pain as they crawl through razor wire. I go, how about an alternate headline from the New York Post of all places? Parents picture dragging their young children through razor wire. What are you doing? Why are you doing that? That's really bad for your children. But when you want that to stop, I would like to create a situation where that's not a thing that happens. Somehow, you and I become the bad guy. Coming up next, we have former CIA official. We have a former ICE agent to give us some insight on all this. And the final segment, we have to talk about the true problem with illegal immigration. It's actually not about the economy. That's a problem too. It's not about their taxing our social services. I hear that all the time too. Conservatives, do not fall for that trap. Do not say that. Oh, well, they're taking up places in our schools. That's not the reason to be against it. That's a reason, but that's not the reason. There's one main reason to be against all this massive illegal immigration in America, and no one is saying it. We will talk about that in the final segment of this show, of this special today, the invasion. It's in fact what it is, the invasion of America. Mike Slater, The First TV. Spread the word.
It is my testimony that the border is secure.
The president have worked very hard to implement a strategy when it comes to the border that is humane, safe, and has orderly enforcement.
Things are going at the border, sir.
Much better than you all expected.
We have a secure border in that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration.
We have responded with a model approach that has proven to work.
We have taken unprecedented action over the past year and a half to secure our border.
And we have a process in place to manage migrants at the border. We're working to make sure it's safe and orderly and humane.
The border is closed.
We agree that the border is secure.
We're executing a comprehensive strategy to secure our borders.
One of our highest priorities is to ensure that we have a secure border, and that is what we are doing.
We are stopping the flow at the border.
The border is secure.
It's a great montage. And the pictures on the right don't even pretend to tell the full story of what's going on behind the scenes. Mike Baker's here. He's the host of the President Daily Brief podcast, former CIA officer. Mike, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
I'm grateful you're here. So I want to ask you the opening question that we opened our segment with. Is this an invasion? So putting your former CIA member hat on, how do you define that? And is that what this is? Or what other word would you use to define it?
Yeah, I suppose an invasion would imply what we're looking at with Putin, right, into Ukraine. That's what most people think of when they think of invasion. It is a concerted, strategic military operation, right? Now, if you substitute the cartels for Putin's military, then yes, because what's happened is they've taken advantage of a self-inflicted wound by the Biden administration to leave essentially open borders, despite what the montage said. And the cartels have taken that opportunity and are now essentially leading the invasion because they're controlling the border. They're controlling the border, certainly on the Mexican side. They're controlling the flow of all those humans pouring across the border on a daily basis. And so, yes, I think invasion, it can take many shapes and forms, and I think this certainly fits the bill.
What are these cartels doing at the border? What are they bringing across?
Well, narcotics and humans, not to oversimplify the matter, but essentially that's it. And then look, if the cartel operations, and there's a number of cartels, obviously, right? And there's a lot of infighting that goes on to control portions of the border, because essentially, if you're a corporation as a cartel, you are currently just knocking it out of the park in terms of your quarterly returns and your revenue streams and what you can return to the shareholders. They're making unprecedented amounts of money along the border, and essentially that is coming from human trafficking and an increased flow of narcotics.
But El Chapo's family said they're done. They're out of the fentanyl business. What's the problem? What are you worried about?
That's right. Yeah, look at that. El Chapo's family's seen the light. They're wiping their hands clean of fentanyl. Well, look, there's two parts to that, right? First of all, they're making money off of fentanyl. Second of all, there is, I suspect, these are business operations, and they've been in operation for a long time. So they understand the ebb and flow of U.S. law enforcement, the ebb and flow of U.S. public opinion. They spend a lot of time watching that. I mean, right? They're operating as a business would. And so, in part, what you're seeing with that is El Chapo's family basically saying, the increased attention towards fentanyl is screwing up our other narcotics trafficking operations, right? It's bringing in additional unwanted attention and, to some degree, law enforcement resources. And so, it's a bit of a PR exercise on their part. But there's two parts to that. But it's not like the El Chapo's gang is getting out of the narcotics business.
No. It'd be like Coca-Cola being like, you know what? No more Coke.
Yeah.
We're done with Coca-Cola. We're just it's time. It'll be the obesity epidemic is a big problem. We're gonna stop with that.
That's right.
What is the CIA's?
That worked out so well. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the CIA's role in understanding what's happening at the border and then before, like as things are brewing down in Venezuela and Colombia and everything else, and people are coming up and through, the Darien Gap and up through Mexico? What's the CIA's role now?
Yeah, by the way, Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, is making his way towards the Darien Gap to talk with the immigrants and explain that New York is not the place to be. So if you wanted to think that this could get any more bizarre, a Democrat mayor of the major U.S. city going down to try to stop the flow of migrants by saying, hey, we're stretched thin on resources. I don't know whether he's going to try to convince him that San Francisco is a better spot. But look, the role of the CIA is, as it always is, on national security concerns. It's a provision of intelligence and liaison with our partners. So primarily, what are we talking about here? We're talking about DEA, CPB, and state and federal officials who can utilize the intelligence that the agency gathers on cartel operations, on the potential complicity of individuals within militaries and law enforcement down, below our southern border. I hate to say that, there occasionally could be some complicit actions by the part of law enforcement in other countries, but that's the role essentially, right? I mean, we have a counter-narcotics center, much like we have a counterterrorism center. We have worked against the narcotics problem for decades. And, it's always been a heavy lift, in part because U.S. policies, shift and change, priorities change, our focus, adjusts. Sometimes it seems as if the U.S., no matter who's in the White House, you can't do more than one thing at a time. So multitasking becomes a problem.
I've gone back and forth with the war on drugs and what to do about it and what to think about it. But at this point, with the chemicals coming from Wuhan, China, going to Mexico, up through the border and poisoning America, I think was it Ross Perot? Someone a while back was like, "Oh, this is just a chemical warfare against the American people." Like a leading cause of death amongst people of certain demographics. Like, this is crazy what we're allowing here, and I think it's worthy of a war. What do you say to that? And then also, what's the threat to our country that you see at the southern border as a former CIA agent?
Well, I think that I'll flip those and answer the last one first. But if, from the 30,000-foot level, the biggest threat we've got is if you don't have secure borders, right? If you don't control your borders, this has been said many, many times, and you're not really a nation, right? Because every other nation out there, and trust me, I've lived all over hell and back, right? I spent my entire adult life and most of my childhood overseas, and every nation protects its borders, secures its borders, right? I mean, try to go illegally into Mexico and live there and get a work permit and health benefits illegally. It's not going to happen, right? But the U.S. Tends to be the only country out there that apologizes or feels angsty about the secure border concept. right? Because somehow the Democrats have convinced everybody that if you want to secure the border and understand who's crossing that border coming into your country, then you must be racist or anti-immigrant, and that's just a load of crap. So this is a top line national security concern, and if we don't get it right, you can secure the borders and have immigration reform. You can do both of those things. I mean, I don't think our current politicians can do those two things because they're so dysfunctional, but you can actually multitask and do those things.
Where there's a will, we don't right now. Mike Baker,
We don't.
host of the President's Daily Brief podcast. Of course, check it out, former state officer. Mike, wonderful to meet you, sir. Appreciate you. Keep up the great work.
Of course. Thank you, man. I appreciate your opportunity.
Thanks, brother. Coming up next, we'll talk with a former ICE agent, get his insight in this, and then we'll end up with my the number one reason why we need to be against illegal immigration. There's plenty, right? You just heard a bunch right there. But what's the top reason from my perspective? I'll share it with you coming up. Mike Slater, The First TV. Spread the word.
I don't want them there. Take them someplace else or send them back to Venezuela. I don't care where they go. This is wrong. You got 73% of the people homeless in this city are black people. What have you done for them?
That's really an amazing part of this whole story, has been that now these illegal immigrants have been shipped to other cities up north. Finally, people in these other cities are like, oh yeah, this is a huge problem now. Well, it's been a huge problem in Texas and Arizona and Southern California for a long time. Victor Avila is here. He's a former ICE agent. He's running for Congress in the district on this is it, like the southern half of the Texas border, Eagle Pass, Del Rio, all the towns that most people have never heard of that are now in the news all the time for what's happening with illegal immigration there. Right now it's run by, the congressman is Tony Gonzalez, and Victor's running for that seat. Victor, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good, Mike. Thanks for having me.
How is morale among your former ICE agents right now?
There is no morale. They actually have been demoralized. I was just with them in Eagle Pass, Texas, this past week for a couple of days. Let me tell you, they're being vilified because they have been put in a horrible, horrible situation by the instruction of Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and the Biden administration to cut the razor wire that the state of Texas put up, the National Guard and Texas DPS troopers, and to allow them in. It is the most outstanding thing that I have ever seen in my career working this border for 20 years. I had never seen the struggle and conflict between the federal government and the state government, and we should all be on the same page trying to protect our country.
I saw that video the other day, and I wasn't sure that's what that was, or if that was a deep fake video or something from a previous time. I didn't know what that was. You're telling me that ICE agents were told to cut the barbed wire?
The Border Patrol agents on the ground, it is something that is just incredible. So the National Guard, the State Guard will go up there, they put up a bunch of razor wire. The aliens, when they know that they're coming up from the river, this is Eagle Pass, Texas, they stand and wait at the bank of the river. This is the most ironic thing, for a green uniform, in other words, for a Border Patrol agent to show up, because they know that they're going to be granted access by the same administration or the same agency that usually would arrest them for doing this illegally. And so here comes Border Patrol agents while they get freed up after processing hundreds of them under the bridge. They come over, they cut the razor wire, they let them up, and then they move away. The State Guard then goes back, replaces the razor wire, and I saw this happen over and over and over in the 2-day period that I was there. This is not America. I didn't recognize it for sure.
Why were they told to cut the razor wire? What was the pretense?
Well, this is the deliberate actions and policies of the Biden administration that they're not enforcing immigration law. And they'll tell you asylum, they'll tell you parole, they'll tell you all these excuses to allow illegal aliens from 150 different countries to come into our country illegally. And they're just ignoring it. They're allowing them in. They're deliberately allowing them. We use the word process a lot. no one's really being processed. They go into these facilities, these soft-sided tents that have been built, by the way, they're over capacity. El Paso has a capacity of 2,400. There's over 5,000. There's a capacity in Eagle Pass of 1,000. They're over 4,000 there, and they're starting to release them to the streets.
It's one thing, though, to not enforce border policy. It's another to cut the razor wire to make it easier for people to come in. That's next level. They're actively going out of their way to make it easier.
Yeah, and that's the demoralization part, that these border agents, believe me, they don't want to do this, but they've been forced to do that. They've been instructed and ordered to do it, and if they don't do it, they will lose their jobs and have other consequences. And so it's important not to blame the individual border agent, but it's this administration that have put them in this difficult position.
Totally. Let's take just 1 minute. If you can give us a little lesson here on the jurisdiction differences between Border Patrol and ICE and DEA, and we just talked to a CIA officer. So what do all these different people do, and what's an ICE agent do?
That's a great question, Mike, because there are different jurisdictions, and a lot of them surround the border. So an ICE special agent, which is what I was, a criminal investigator that investigates the crimes of anything that has a nexus to our U.S. border, and that includes the illicit movement of goods and people. In this case, we're talking about human smuggling, human trafficking, drug trafficking. ICE or HSI, Homeland Security Investigation Special Agents, have the sole jurisdiction to investigate these activities. Border Patrol agents are the interdictors. Think of them as a patrol officer on the street that pulls you over. They're the first contact. And if something would require an investigation, they would call a detective. That's where the ICE agents come in. DEA, on the other side, you mentioned them. They're the Drug Enforcement Administration that enforces the drugs in the interior of our country. They also work abroad around the world, but their sole jurisdiction is inside the United States of America.
Okay. What is ICE up to these days? Because we have these illegal immigrants. We know where they are, many of them. We could find them. But I'm sure you're not given authority to go deport, to try to find them and kick them out. And would that even be possible? This is something that people on the right say, we got to get them, the millions of them, and deport them. Is that even a thing if we wanted to do that?
So a couple of things. One, the ICE enforcement removal operations, what they call ERO, are the ones in the interior that are supposed to do just that. Look for illegal aliens and deport them and remove them from this country. That is happening at a very, very minuscule percentage. Their hands have been tied by this administration. If you remember, the Biden administration said they were going to abolish ICE. And the way they're abolishing ICE is by taking away their authority. They couldn't take away the money, so they just took away their authority, including Border Patrol agents. And you asked me, can we remove people? By the way, I think there's at least 30 million illegal aliens present in our country, and that's a difficult task. We need to start somewhere. You need to go after, obviously, the criminal aliens. You need to go after another group that a lot of times people don't talk about, and those are the overstays, the visa overstays. These are people that came in an airplane with a visa. They think they're somehow have some kind of status, but they overstayed their visa. They're completely illegal as well. We need to start picking these people up. You start removing a couple of million people, I think you will see a ripple effect of some of them self-deporting themselves back to their country.
Yes, let's not forget that over half of the illegal immigrants here in America came through overstayed visas. And there's next to zero enforcement of that. And of course, after 9/11, they were all on overstayed visas as well. What would you suggest is the first thing we do? We got to stop this right now. What's the first thing you think we should do?
Well, the first thing is, it seems very simple, and it's incredible that we have to go and even mention this. Well, one thing I tell you what we do not need. We don't need no new legislation. We have to have had and presented new legislation because to force this administration to do something, but we really don't need it. What we need is just to give the authority back to the Border Patrol agents to actually do their job, which is detect and detain. But one important aspect of this is you need the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney's Office on board, and they are on board with the Biden administration. So even if a border agent detects a human smuggling case, per se, they have the smuggler, they have the driver, he's carrying 10, 12 illegal aliens, they call the Assistant U.S. Attorney for prosecution, and they're declining to prosecute that case. So they're getting blocked even by the Department of Justice. So those cases are going nowhere, and they're releasing these people into the United States.
Well, again, talk about a morale crusher right there. So it's just like woke DAs in different cities. You have woke DAs in the federal government not enforcing these crimes. That's very interesting. What do you say, Victor, is the difference between these tired and poor huddled masses from the Italian immigrants and the Irish immigrants who came in the late 1800s and early 1900s, who were dirt poor, abject poverty, treated like considered lower and less than and dumber than even free blacks in America, which was not a very high status as well. And they thought they would never make it in America. And now we have St. Patrick's Day and everyone wears green. Like, won't this just be the same? Like, won't one day we just have whatever the Venezuelan holiday is and we all have Venezuelan food, whatever that is, and I'm Venezuelan today, punch me, I'm Venezuelan. Why won't that also happen in 50 years?
It's not going to happen. And I'm going to tell you the big difference here is that those immigrants, when they came here, they wanted to be Americans. They became Americans. That means that they assimilated to this country. The majority, and I tell you this from experience, I've been arresting illegal aliens all my career. And I used to see, even 20 years ago, I used to still see a lot of those economic migrants that want to be Americans, not just use our country to better themselves and the people from their country. Remember, they in Mexico alone, they received $59 billion last year on remittances of the illegal aliens from this country. So they're sustaining their people and their country. But the big difference now is the lack of assimilation and the people wanting their country within ours. So they want Venezuela here. They want Nicaragua here. They want the Middle East. They want China. And that's a huge difference. They don't want to assimilate. They don't want to be Americans, but they want the fruits of this country. And I'm sorry, you can't have your cake and eat it too.
How have you seen that different over the last 20 years of your career?
It's the entitlement. It's the entitlements that they know that they're going to get, the money, the education, the healthcare, jobs. Well, some, of course, there's some that want to work and do work. The majority that I'm seeing now are just kind of here. I'm here, take care of me. And another thing I want to say is a threat to national security. And speaking of Venezuelans, because that's the major group that's coming over right now. When I was in Eagle Pass, I was hearing 6 million illegals coming from Venezuela. And that's a large number. I don't know how many of those are going to actually come to our country, but I am telling you, there's already hundreds of thousands, possibly millions already here. But the big difference is that we have some of these people that are coming that are Hugo Chavez sympathizers. These are communists. And they bring in that communism and that mentality and that culture to our country. The same thing with Chinese nationals. It's very hard to determine their agenda or what's the reason why they come into this country. And this is, I say it all the time, it's a public safety issue and a national security issue. And we're not even talking, we haven't even mentioned the cartels and terrorists. That's another issue as well.
Victor Avila, how can people support your campaign? Because right now the district is represented by a Republican, Tony Gonzalez. So what's the problem there, and how can people support your campaign instead?
Well, they're supporting me. You could go to victoravilaforcongress.com and two main votes that he's done a lot of votes with the left. The two main ones are that he was solely responsible for killing a border security bill, which is called H.R. 29. He killed it, which makes absolutely no sense. And then he voted for red flag laws and to restrict our Americans in Texas from bearing firearms. Those two things alone, and there's other votes that he has gone against the district. That's why he got censured earlier in the year by the Texas Republican Party. And so if you support me and my ideas, I know how to fix this. There's some of the things that'll be fixed very easily in 2024. Others will take a little bit of time, but I have that experience not just on the border, but also outside of the country, in Mexico, where I work there, and in Europe. And we need to address those countries as well. So please support me at victoravilaforcongress.com.
Victor, wonderful to talk to you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That last part was a perfect segue into our final segment. The number one, the top reason why we need to be against illegal immigration. It's a potentially difficult case to make, or it's people are hesitant to make it. We can't be anymore. We have to be confident to make it, and I'll make it next. Mike Slater on the First TV. Spread the word. Welcome back to our special, The Invasion of America. if I may make a suggestion when talking about illegal immigration, I think conservatives have missed an opportunity for a long time. First of all, don't call them migrants, they're not. But secondly, we need to stop saying, oh, they're taxing our social services. I hear people say that. You know what the left says? Okay, great, just raise taxes. Oh, I'm against illegal immigration because they're filling up our schools, our emergency rooms. Oh, okay, well, we need to build more schools and more emergency rooms. Oh, I'm against them because they're voting for Democrats. I'd be against it if they were coming across the border wearing MAGA hats. I'm against illegal immigration because first it's breaking the law. Oh, we'll just change the law. Now they're not breaking it anymore. Voila, done. Okay, you want to know the number one reason why? It's changing our culture. Dangerous thing to say. But it's the most important thing to say. Culture is everything. By the way, not skin color. Skin color means nothing. It's culture. Now, we never talk about culture, so people don't know what it means. There's a lot of different aspects to culture, some good, some bad. And two different types of culture don't necessarily blend nicely together. Some cultures around the world have no women's rights. None. Women are property, and they can be killed. Who are you to say that's wrong? That's their culture. But it's not our culture. They're called honor killings. So do we want people in our country or in your neighborhood who believe in honor killings? Oh, it's just their culture. Who are you to say that that's bad? There are cultures that have a more chivalry-based culture. Some are more misogyny-based. How are men expected to treat women? That's a cultural value. There's shame cultures and guilt cultures. Afghanistan is a shame culture, meaning what you do is not wrong until someone catches you. You steal from a store, no problem. It's their fault they didn't secure it enough. But if you get caught, you brought shame to your family. In America, we have a guilt-based culture where it's wrong to steal, even if you don't get caught. The guilt comes from within. Shame-based culture comes from external. Guilt-based comes from internal, from within. It's a big difference. There are secular cultures and Christian cultures and Muslim cultures, and different cultures, different worldviews have different answers to big questions that matter. Like, why does suffering occur? This is a big one. Why does suffering occur? Okay, well, Christianity has an answer to that. The Hindus have an answer as well. They believe it's karma. So all of your suffering comes from misdeeds that you committed in a previous life. So all the suffering that is experiencing today by the untouchables in Indian culture, that's deserved. And therefore, you can't get involved in helping them because then you would be interfering with karma, cosmic justice. How interesting. It's culture. The question is, how do we help people in need? Or do we? Sorry, not even how. Do we help people in need? In Hindu culture, no, you don't. There's different cultures when it comes to hard work. We've had a more hard-working culture compared to, say, the Samoans. Culture is everything. Even within ethnicities in America, the ethnic culture that has the highest income in America are Indians. That's the ethnic group that has the highest income, are Indians by far. The lowest are Ethiopians and Moroccans. Ethiopians and Moroccans in America. Why? Moroccans aren't black, so it's not race. What is different about Ethiopian culture and Moroccan culture that has resulted in them having the lowest income of any other ethnic group in America? And what's different about those cultures from Indian culture that makes them by far the highest? I just want to reiterate again, it's not race. Here's Joe Biden talking about race.
The world's changing, John. And the fact is, we're going to be very shortly a minority white European country.
White doesn't mean anything. European, perhaps, because European means that has reference to a type of culture. Now, there's different cultures within Europe as well that matter. Not only where did immigrants come from Italy, but northern or southern Italy, big difference. Read about, Thomas Sowell has amazing books all about this. Culture matters. Culture is all that matters. I'll Buy and Seed is a fantastic book if you want to learn more about this. And the author talks about different folk ways. These are just different aspects of culture that exist. And we don't think about these because we just live it. We have it. We have our culture. We don't even realize it. It's like a fish not realizing it's swimming in water. So here's the different types of cultural values. We have speech, architecture, family structure, marriage expectations. There's the whole list right there. Gender, sex, views of child rearing, age, respecting elders, or we have a youth-based culture in America. How cultures view death, religion, learning. Do you value education or do you not value education? Cultures are different. You maybe grew up in a house in a culture that values it. That's great. Not everyone around the world does. Views on food, what you wear, sports, work, time. This is why you hear people on the left, or like Black Lives Matter people, they're like, Oh, you're imposing your white standards of time by requiring black people to show up to something in a punctual way. Those are cultural differences. Have you ever been to Puerto Rico? There's no such like island time, right? These are different. Wealth, hierarchy, order, the idea of views on freedom, like these are all different cultural values. And this is what we need to consider when it comes to immigrants and who we let in. So let's talk about our new friends from Venezuela. I had a caller on my radio show on SiriusXM say her friend is from Venezuela. And she said that the men in Venezuela, they have a culture of machismo. So it's a very prideful, strutting masculinity that is easily offended and expects to be waited on. Do we want that here? Venezuela also has a culture of corruption, right? You got to pay people to get stuff done. You want that fixed, you got to pay them a little more. You got to write that stuff. Do we want that here? I don't. People aren't prepared to talk about this though. Because it's like, oh, you're talking about race. No, it's the opposite of race. It's the opposite. But also people don't want to talk about it because they don't even know what our culture is. And we've been trained that all multiculturalism is good. No. We've been trained to think that all cultures are great and exciting and wonderful. No, wrong. Some aspects of our culture are very bad. I'd like to change too. But that's also the good news about culture. You can change it. But most people don't know, they can't recognize or identify what we are, who we are. And they certainly can't recognize who we should be. If you just grew up in a certain town in America with a certain culture, you don't even recognize that, wow, I grew up in a culture that values hard work and values humility and is chivalrous to women and values education and wakes up early and goes to work. Like you don't even know that until one day you live in a neighborhood now that's full of people who don't value hard work, who have machismo, who are misogynistic towards women, who don't value education. Like, oh, geez, when did this happen? Oh, it's because they're that race. No. Culture. And we know this is true. If you're looking for a roommate, you want to find a roommate that matches your culture, right? Do you want someone who's neat or do you want someone who's messy, who goes to bed late or goes to bed early, exercises or plays video games, right? You want a culture that matches. It's the same for our country. And just to reiterate, not all cultures are all bad or all good. There's some good things about different cultures and bad things about different cultures, and we can pick and choose, but that's my point. I'd like to pick and choose. I'd like to do a worldwide inventory of different cultures and different pros and cons. That way we can say, hey, this culture of these people actually assimilate really well to our culture. Or this culture of, let's say, Japanese people from this part of Japan, we want to be more of that. So let's bring those people in. Or these people from this section of Kenya, wow, their culture is this, and we love that. We want more of that in our culture, so let's bring more people in from that. Or I'd like some thoughtfulness to it. But we don't know who we are. We don't know what made us the greatest country in the world. We don't even know the cultural values that made that happen. All we're told today is that we're the worst ever. We can't judge anyone. So we got to let everyone in. So don't worry about the argument. I mean, listen, these are arguments to make, right? These are reasons to be against illegal immigration, like taking our jobs and lowering wages and filling up emergency rooms in schools. Yeah. But how are these people changing our culture? So we need to identify what made us the greatest country in the world. Who do we want to be? And then look at cultures around the world and recognize what their pros and cons are, and then decide if that's what we want more of. So the number one reason to be against illegal immigration is it changes our culture. When you do it just willy-nilly, whatever, it will absolutely change it for the worst. Mike Slater, The First TV, The Invasion of America. Spread the word.